Thank you. Thank you kindly. Thanks very much. Thank you. I told you would be in safe hands earlier on. May I just take a second to introduce you to three distinguished European musicians up here. On piano, he started his short life in Aberdeen, Scotland, and now resides in Sofia, Bulgaria. Would you welcome Steve Hamilton? On bass, an English Yorkshireman now living in Barcelona, Spain, Mark Hodgson. On saxophones and wine tasting, in the centre, would you welcome Patrick Clahar?
EARTHWORKS was formed specifically around 2 or 3 ideas, actually. The basic one was electronic drums, which now you think of electronic drums one way, but in the mid-'80s, electronic drums were a fast developing instrument with great excitement. And here's the thing, suddenly by the mid-'80s, you could play chords, samples, pitches, notes, Father Christmas, anything you wanted, all at the same time. And this could make a breathtaking sort of percussive, melodic, harmonic backdrop. And you'd have drummers, such as myself, who could sound like a whole orchestra all at once by playing these various chords. Sounded like a great idea to me. It also sounded like it was becoming serious enough to want to introduce us to jazz. Up until then, you see, electronic drums had been considered a toy. The rock guys used, like Depeche Mode or something, you know, you could. And we thought that's all that electronic drums did. Not true. They could, through the use of MIDI, be really amazing instruments. So, here's the thing, I'll put them into jazz, we'll see if we can use them expressively in a jazz context. I'll hire 3 of the best young British players, and I'll do this stuff behind them, and they will sound different. Just by definition, whatever they're going to do is going to sound different. So that's how EARTHWORKS started, really, was to introduce that instrument. The other 3 guys would play single notes only, single note on the bass, single note on the flat tenor horn, single note lines on the saxophone. And I would take care of the chords and the harmony. And that's how we started, and that was a good CD. You know, that was a real popular one here in the United States, you know, USA Today, 3rd best CD of the year, all that stuff. So it was quite a hit. The 3 other guys, Django Bates, and Ian Bellamy, and Mick Hutton, are all still playing in London. Django Bates has a lot of serious acclaim now as a composer. Very good, very talented. So EARTHWORKS flourished under this system with the electronic drums for 3 or 4 years until, as I recall, King Crimson came out of the woodwork. You know, King Crimson's always come out of the woodwork, and kind of I respond to the call of King Crimson and go off and do that. So I put EARTHWORKS in the garage and parked it, you know, turned off the motor, went and played with Crimson for 3 years with this electronic drum set, which also was fascinating from that point of view. And again, as always, you know, King Crimson runs for 2 or 3 years and stops, and I wanted a 2nd edition of EARTHWORKS. One day, I was going to run a jazz quartet of acoustic nature. I knew this was coming. You know. And so the 2nd edition of EARTHWORKS was formed around that. We did initially use some of the material from the earlier band, but you'll understand with a complete change of instrumentation. It's like Hendrix going from electric guitar to acoustic. It's going to be difficult to play the Star Spangled Banner. It's okay, but it's going to sound different. So the current EARTHWORKS, the current and 2nd edition of EARTHWORKS uses only very little of the original EARTHWORKS repertoire. And since then we've devised our own repertoire. I've written quite a lot of music for the band now, you know, some 30-odd pieces. We have a large group of music, a large body of music. And much of it's based on my rhythmic composition from the drums upwards. You know, I start often writing from the drums upwards, and we arrive at the top. The melody and the harmony is a direct result, function of what's happening in the rhythm. What's at least as important to me in EARTHWORKS as the drumming, which I'm interested in, is the composition, which I'm probably more interested in. Half of my income, half of my work as a musician is composition. Half of my income is as a writer, probably. It's a bit like Bob Dylan constantly being asked about his guitar playing. What he does is he writes songs, actually, and the focus, you wouldn't really ask him a lot about his guitar playing. It's okay if it's only 3 chords that 5 million people can play. I sometimes feel it would be nice if people would sometimes ask a little bit about the music I write, you know. And I spend a lot of time with that, more time writing music than I do playing a drum set, probably. Playing the drums is fairly natural, writing's a little harder. Drummers are becoming fully rounded musicians now. It used to be when I grew up the old idea, you know, 4 musicians and a drummer, the old joke. And the drummer was originally an entertainer at the back, a little visual glamour. You know, the guy who twirled the sticks, smiled a lot, played really fast maybe, you know, did the big thing at the end. And we still have that these days, the kind of Led Zeppelin drum solo type thing for most rock shows. We still have that. I would like, if I could, to get away from that. I don't see why the drummer can't have as much of a compositional input as the pianist can. And many good pianists are known for their writing, and very important it is to them too. So therefore for me too. I play the drums, I'll be the drummer on the bandstand, certainly. And sometimes the drumming may be very intriguing, but I'm also there to support the composition. I tend to custom build something for the particular song that's going, and I really like that. And it'll often have some metrical relationship between an A section, a B section, a C section. They're all related, maybe shifting in pulse or some related meter to each other. And I hang these rhythms together, and from that build up a melodic and a harmonic superstructure. And I like that a lot, and I do it frequently on The Sound of Surprise. For example, Triplicity would be a good specimen of that, or perhaps Revel without a pause. That also would be a good specimen of that. So I've been writing for a while. I really like it. Hard work though. It's brutal work. I find it very difficult finding things to do. There's the old joke about, 5% perspiration and 95%. No, 95% perspiration, 5% inspiration. And that's very true, I think. Really, this backs up to the need to play. Most of the reason that you write something, from my point of view, is that you've got a rehearsal room full of musicians. They've got to play something. So what the devil are they going to play? And they look at me and say, well, you called us here. What should we play? And that tends to be, that's how my composition started, out of two ways. One was John Anderson from Yes, continually harping on about how everybody should contribute to the band's composition, to the band's writing. And very nervously, I'd say, well, maybe the bass could do this, and then a few years later, I'd, come up with a whole bass pattern or a whole something, and that would turn into Heart of the Sunrise or some B section for something, and then slowly, you write a harmonic progression, and somebody says, oh, that's nice, we'll use that. And bit by bit, I got into it that way. And the second way, as I say, is almost desperation. You've got a room full of musicians, you want to make an album, you don't quite know what it is, but you've got to have to write something. And that's how I started writing full compositions, was for my first CD, Feels Good to Me, with Annette Peacock and Jeff Berlin and Alan Holdsworth, many years ago now. The idea that, you wrote something in 1976, and that wouldn't it be nice to play it in 2006, and does it have a life, or do you miss not playing it? Not really, no. I think on the whole, I'd like to write stuff that accommodates the ensemble I'm with. So I need to play something now that's going to tickle the imagination of Steve Hamilton and Patrick Clahar. And they're different characters, they hear things differently, and I'm writing with them in mind.
Right, it was great. Playing with Bill's wonderful. It's interesting actually, because when I was a kid, I used to listen to the band with Holdsworth and Berlin in maths lessons at school. I used to have one ear in and listen to my Walkman down the side and pretend I was doing and turn to the side so the maths teacher couldn't see me. Yeah, I love that band, and yeah, I never really heard Bill, the rock drummer, more the kind of fusion jazz musician. So if someone had told me when I was younger I'd be playing with him, I wouldn't have believed them. So in that way, it's great.
I spoke to him on the phone originally, and he mentioned that he was putting a new band together, and he'd heard my name mentioned, recommended to him, and he asked to come down and see me play at a local jazz club. So, which was shortly after that, and he came down and we met, and he stayed for the gig and gave me a call the following day and asked me to do the first tour, and we sort of took it from there. And I knew Bill's work from before with Earthworks, and I knew about his reputation, and it was something that I was really looking to do at that time as well. That kind of project of serious music with a working band, and it just came along at a great time for me.
It kind of came out of the blue because Bill came down to a little gig that I was doing in a bar with some jazz musicians in London, and we were playing, and I kind of saw him there, and somebody said, "Oh, that's Bill Bruford," and then he came up and introduced himself, and then I didn't hear anything from him for a little while, and then I got another phone call saying, "I'm kind of thinking about reforming this band Earthworks." I said, of course, well, if you're thinking of doing this and you want a piano player, I'd be more than willing to come and do this. So it was never never that straightforward.
I was about 12 or 13, and my sister brought in a pair of brushes. And her boyfriend had said, if you play these on the back of an album sleeve, which in those days were thick card, really nice, thick, heavy album sleeve, if you play them, you go on the back of an album sleeve, it'll sound great, sounds like a drum. So I started doing that, and I loved that. And then I got a drum, and then I got 2 drums, like you did in those days, and you got 3 drums. Not necessarily the same. They didn't have to be a drum kit. I had a red one and a blue one and a green one. I liked that. I thought that was nice. And then I slowly picked up the drums that way and fell in the school I was in under the influence of a lot of older guys, 17-year-olds, all of whom played in a jazz quartet, played monk material, Bud Powell stuff, Bill Evans. And I learned to play ting, ting, ting on a cymbal, rather than tum, back, which was the rock beat. There's only 2 beats, you understand. There was the jazz beat and there was the rock beat. And the jazz guys could never play the rock beat with any conviction at all. And the rock guys could never play the jazz beat at all, with or without conviction. I had all the great American show tunes. My mother was a great dancer. She loved music of all sorts. They would kind of roll up the sitting room rug, and dance of an evening, and loved it. And obviously the 2 of them, my mother and father, loved dancing. And we had all the great big bands of the day, a lot of Frank Sinatra and stuff from the 50s and 60s, show tunes, a lot of that. But then specifically the BBC, a trusted British organisation, used to bring into London all the great American jazz artists of the day, all the great guys, and film them in black and white, no color TV of course, on a show called Jazz 625 at 6 on a Saturday night, I think it was. And so every Saturday night, aged 12, 11, 13, 14 years old, I would hear the best of American jazz. Everybody you've ever heard of, Max, Billy Joe Jones, Art Blakey, Lee Morgan, Coltrane, Miles, all that. And they were all wheeled into the studio and all did a show in front of a seated audience. And for half an hour I thought this was the most exciting thing I ever heard. I couldn't understand how the music worked. It seemed like a magic to me. It still does. It's a magic. It's a complete magic. How is it that a guy can play endless choruses and variations of variations as far as the eye can see, for hours on end, with a blistering intensity. And it's just terrific. I've always loved that sound. When you walk into a room and you hear a jazz quartet in full flight, you think, how did they get here? Why are they playing these notes now? Well, of course they started by playing this tune, and then by this version of the melody, and then they abstracted from it and abstracted it again, and the rhythms are becoming more and more strange. And you're in the middle of heaven with a jazz quartet all firing on all 6 cylinders. And I'm privileged enough to have one of my own. But there's something about this, you see, because as I get a little older in life, life takes on, and you begin to realize that you're coming back to the music you grew up with. And the music that I grew up with has never left me, which is how come I run a jazz quartet now. I was so stunned by the music I heard as a teenager that, and then in shock from that, I then went off and became a rocker. I've come back now to hearing the music and wanting to play in the style. Not quite the style, but playing in the context of the music that I heard. Sometimes people ask me if there was, one specific guy that changed my, somebody I'd worked with, who changed my feelings about music. And the answer is, of course, everybody. Everybody I've ever worked with has always changed my attitude to music, and that's why I work with them. That's the whole purpose of it. You work with somebody so that you are deliberately putting yourself in a position of uncertainty, where you don't know what the outcome is. But there's nothing to be afraid of. It could be bumpy, but you'll sure as heck be a different guy when you stop working with him to the guy you were when you started working. And that's how it worked. That's how you learn music. Robert Fripp, particularly, was a very powerful influence on me. John Anderson also. But absolutely everybody I've ever worked with. Django Bates, particularly, Alan Holdsworth, And I would ask these guys questions. It's, I'm a drummer. Why did you play that there? I don't understand. How come you can play those notes over that? It doesn't sound right. Yes, it does. No, it doesn't. And my ear would become more refined, and you begin to hear what it is that they're hearing. You begin to understand what it is that they would want from a drummer. This is the first thing you have to do as a drummer, is put yourself in the other guy's shoes. What's it like being at the front of the band, singing a song, with some guy 7 feet behind you going on a cymbal? And it might be nice, it might not be nice, but you've got to imagine it. Then when you can imagine it from his point of view, you learn how to control your own instrument to support him and offer him whatever it is he wants. Maybe he wants that, maybe not, but you imagine it from the bass player's point of view. Tony Levin taught me a lot about music. All these guys are my music teachers. I've had 2 different types of music teacher. One is my record player, which, of course, every record I've ever heard has had some influence. And the guys I've worked with, my other music teachers. So that's the school I went to. I didn't go to a school like Berkeley in Boston or anything like that. I'm one of the last of the great unwashed, one of the last of the great untrained. Everything I've figured out in music's been picked up off the floor, picked up out of the gutter, or learned from somewhere, or learned from bitter experience, or learned out of embarrassment, which is just as good as a school, probably better than a school, actually. But that's why I formed bands, is to learn more about music, to try to refine my thing more. My own particular choice in music now has become more delicate. It's more controlled. Oh no, control is the wrong word. It's more intimate. It happens faster. It happens lighter. If you blink, you'll miss it. It happens in rooms like this that are 200 or 300 people. It happens often without microphones. It's more done at the conversational level that I'm speaking at now. It comes with great variety. It's called jazz.